This is John Stern. I'm the Senior Curator of California Impressionism at the University of California, Irvine Museum. And I'm here going to talk to Eric Rhoads about the specific problems that the art world is in right now with this virus closing down just about everything. So Eric is probably the best informed person on this subject, and he's been advising artists for many years now on how to handle their career. But this is completely different. All the art galleries are closed and almost everything has gone online. So Eric, what suggestions do you have for artists while their art gallery career is on hold indefinitely?
Hi, Jean. Thank you for the introduction. Wow, that's a big question. And this is unlike anything anybody's ever seen. I have lived through, and I have gray hair to prove it, as do you, 4 recessions now, and being in business for 4 recessions, I have a little bit of background in history and experience. But I think the very first thing is just don't freak out.
Yeah.
Because I was talking to a friend of mine this morning who is a therapist, and she was, she said she's getting a lot of calls from her friends and her customers. And she said, look, you shouldn't be worrying about something you can't change. Only worry about what you can change, and you can't change this. So be thinking in terms of what can I change? What can I implement? What should I be doing now? And that's what I want to talk about today. So I think there's a lot of things, but I want to go back and give you a little bit of history. Recessions are one thing. We don't know yet what this looks like. Right now, I think there's 3 million people unemployed. It may have doubled, may have gone to 6 million people. That's a huge problem, but it's because of obviously virus, not the economy that was bad. The economy was actually pretty good. Everybody I know was telling me how good their businesses have been, not all artists, but most other people. And so we have to hope and assume, first off, that the economy will get better as soon as this quarantine is over worldwide, and we don't know how long that'll last. But I think that you want to go back to the worst time in history that we know of, and there have been 47 recessions in America since the beginning of America. And by the way, it's thundering and lightning out, so I apologize if you hear some thunder. The Great Depression was a time which was many years before your time, before my time, but my father remembers going through the Great Depression and has told me stories about it. But if you look at the Great Depression, there are a couple of things that you want to realize. That first off, not everybody is affected. We assume because we're affected that everybody's affected. Now, everybody's in quarantine. In that regard, everybody's affected. And every business is affected in some way, but not necessarily in a negative way. For instance, there are some companies that are probably making more money now than they ever were making in history because they happen to have a product or happen to step up to do a product that relates to solving this problem. But there also, in the Great Depression, there were a lot of wealthy people who actually became, there were people who were not wealthy who became wealthy. There were people who were wealthy who became wealthier. And of course, there were people who were wealthy who lost everything. And so what you want to ask yourself is there opportunity in this? And the answer is, yeah, there is. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. But first, I want to tell you the story, Jean, of Kellogg's and Post cereals. Maybe you've heard this, but Post cereals was the king of all cereals before the Great Depression. It had something like a 90% market share, and they were secure. They were making a lot of money. Well, they decided when the Great Depression hit that they would save money. They were still in business, but they stopped their advertising. And most people, whenever there's an economic disaster, they stop their advertising. And so Post cereals stopped. In the meantime, there was a young startup by the name of Kellogg, K-E-L-L-O-G-G, right? And Kellogg started their business right before the Great Depression, And so most people, if they were starting their business before the Great Depression, would say, I'm going to wait. This is awful. Well, they were a gnat. They were small. They were tiny. Post decided they were nothing to be worried about because they had a 90% market share. Kellogg, in the meantime, started advertising. You could buy advertising at record low rates. They spent a lot of money on advertising, and they dominated advertising. When Post saw that advertising, they said, they can't hurt us. We have a 90% market share. By the end of the Great Depression, Kellogg was the #1 brand, and Post became the #2 brand. Kellogg had a 50% market share, and Post had about a 40% market share, and then everybody else had the rest. And so Kellogg established their leadership at that time, and because of that, they have never lost their lead. Now, they might lose their lead if this turns into a depression or something and somebody else steps up, but the idea being that there's opportunity in this. So how do you translate this if you're an artist? Well, let me give you an example of an art gallery. I won't use names because I don't have permission to use names, but most of us could probably figure this out. There was a guy who worked in a capacity for a big consulting firm, and this guy knew his wife, and he decided they wanted to start an art gallery, but they decided that they were going to kind of wait till the right time. And this guy knew that whenever there was a recession, that the first thing most businesses do is they cut their advertising, because that's the easiest expense to cut. It's easier to cut advertising, for instance, than it is to lay off people. We all know that. But he realized that the best time to start was when it was a recession. So he had everything lined up. He waited till a recession began in 2008, and he launched his gallery in 2008. And I was around, and I remember everybody thinking this guy was nuts. In the meantime, there were several galleries that dominated the category that they were in. And those, I remember having conversations with those galleries, and those galleries were saying, you know, Eric, we can't advertise with your magazines. We're cutting all of our advertising. And of course, I encouraged them to stay, but they didn't. And this guy realized that that was the best thing to happen to him. So he was out there, he was visible, and he knew that if you're out of sight and out of mind for a month or two, you might as well just close your doors, because you've got to, you have what's called a pipeline. And that pipeline are people who are looking at your work, visiting your website, talking to your gallery, things like that. And when that pipeline gets empty, in other words, you're not advertising to bring new people in to look at your website, to talk to you, et cetera. When that pipeline is empty, you eventually run out of customers. Then the theory that he took was that if each of these galleries had a reduced number of sales because of the recession, that if he advertised and they didn't, he would take the sales they would have had. So he'd get 10% from this guy and 10% from this lady. And next thing you know, he was flush with cash and he had business, and he wasn't struggling. He was making money and doing well during the recession. In the meantime, those galleries that stopped advertising, actually, most of them went out of business. They went away forever, because what you don't really think about or realize is that once you lose your momentum, then once momentum is gone, if you have to start up again, it's too late, because it takes sometimes a year, 2 years to get momentum. The other thing that he realized, and I think any artist or any gallery should realize, is that you're in a less cluttered environment. And now, for instance, in this period of time when we're quarantined, you have people who are not busy. They're not crazy. Some of us are working from home, and a lot of people are working from home, but they have more time on their hands. They're not going out to restaurants. They're not busy with so many things that they're crazy. So that, what are they doing? They have more leisure time. What are they doing with that leisure time? They're looking online, they're looking on social media, they're reading their favorite magazines and things like that. I know I'm turning to things that I was not spending time with before. And so if you have let's say you have a magazine like mine, which clearly has fewer advertisers because some people have backed out, your ad stands out more. And as a result, you stand out more. They have more time. They're going to spend more time reading and looking, understanding, going to your website and figuring things out. So that's one of the things.
Yeah, that's good. That's a lot. Now, as you know, my family's all art dealers, and what you said is very relevant. If the art gallery's closed, what do you do as both as an artist and as a dealer?
Well, I think that's a great question. I started a campaign yesterday called hashtag Buy Art Now, and it's kind of gone viral. And what I am encouraging galleries and artists to do is to post on their Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, to post their websites and then to put the hashtag Buy Art Now. And then we're encouraging people to go search that hashtag in those sites so that they can browse and look at different art galleries and artists and see what they have. And we're trying to encourage the people that do have money, and there are a lot of them who do, who have jobs. You know, if you're a really rich person and you've been hit in the stock market, you're still, a lot of those people are still really rich. I was talking to a friend of mine a couple days ago. He said he lost $700,000 in the stock market. That's a lot of money. For most people, that might be a lifetime of savings or more. But I said, so are you in trouble? He said, no, I have millions. And so he said, you know, I don't like losing it, but he said, by the way, this is a great opportunity to buy art. I'm going to go try to find some deals. Well, so why not?
Because there was an auction a couple of weeks ago at Bottoms, and the really good material went for sky-high prices.
Yeah, there's still things out there, but it's also great time to, you know, you can, there's going to be art sales that are at high prices and people still buying them, but there's also going to be deals. I talked to a friend of mine today. He's actually an art dealer, and he was telling me that he called the Ferrari dealer in Beverly Hills, and first off, usually to get a Ferrari, it's like a 6-month waiting period. He said they had several available, and he was able to get the best deal. He's owned several Ferraris. He's able to get the best deal ever on a Ferrari. That's not a world that I live in, but I think it was pretty cool. And so there are deals out there. But I think the idea here is that if you're an artist or you're an art gallery, or quite frankly, in any business, you don't want to stop your activity. Whatever activity that you've always done, you always want to continue that. Now, if you have shows, I talked to an artist earlier today who said, I have a show, but you know, the city is closed down. What am I to do? I said, keep painting, start working on the next show, and know that you're going to have to move that show to another gallery soon. And there's going to be a gallery out there as soon as things open who are going to want a show. So start working that angle now, because assume this is over with in 30, 60, 90 days, however long it takes, and start working that angle now about scheduling a show. But also stay visible. You know, you've got to keep visible and talking to your existing customers. I have a strategy that I've always taught in Art Marketing Boot Camp, and that is about repeat customers. We all tend to focus as business people on how do I get new customers, and yet, you know, from your lifetime in dealing art, the best customers are the customers that bought art that keep coming back and buying more art, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So if you focus right now on a repeat strategy, just first off, don't automatically assume that the people you're talking to will not buy anything just because you don't have any money. Some of them might, and they might not buy right now, but they might if there's a deal, or maybe they don't even need a deal. So you should be talking to the customers that you already have. If you're a dealer, even though your doors are closed, you need to pick up the phone and have a conversation with people that you normally do business with. It may not be a, hey, can I sell you an art conversation? It may just be a check-in, how are you doing? How can I help you? And then, you know, maybe you have an opportunity to lead to a discussion about by the way, I've got some great paintings around, and by the way, you know, we're not selling much these days, but if you're interested in something, you know, I probably would cut you a little bit of a deal right now because we don't know how long this is going to last. And some people will jump on that. But so stay in touch with your customers. Artists should be staying in touch with the people who have bought paintings from them in the past. People that we're finding this in our business, people that we can never get a hold of are picking up the phone and being willing to spend 20, 30 minutes or an hour on the phone, where before you couldn't even get them on the phone because they were so busy. Now, you know, everybody's kind of like, I love to talk to some people, see some human beings. I've been stuck in the house, right?
No, you're absolutely right. People don't go anywhere, so they turn to the internet, and there's a lot of activity going on the internet. And I mean, myself, I don't go to the museum anymore. They closed the museum temporarily. I'm always on my computer, and I'm talking to people and looking at art and checking things. That's what people do when they're stuck at home.
That's right. And you have to assume a couple of things. First off, there will be an increased demand at some point. So one of the principles of marketing is repetition, the idea of creating desire through repetition. So when I was in the radio broadcasting business, I still am involved in that business, but when I owned stations, I would tell my clients, you know, if you run a single ad, it'll get heard one time, but isn't necessarily anybody gonna take any action on it. It's the idea that if you run an ad or you hear something multiple times, you go through these different stages. You go from I wasn't aware to now I'm aware. Then you go from being aware to, well, now I'm interested, and then now I might buy, and then now I'm gonna buy. And so it's that repetition. And the reason you see car dealers on all the time on TV is because they know people are always in and out of the market. A friend of mine told me yesterday about a car dealer he knows that says, look, any given day, somebody's gonna wake up one day and say, I'm gonna buy a car. Well, the same is true for art. And it's, you know, somebody might wake up one day and say, you know, we just bought a new house and we need to put some new paintings up. Or somebody might wake up one day and say, gee, Aunt Mary just died and left me $100,000 and I've been looking at this painting. Now I can afford it. I'm going to go buy it. And that's because people are always in and out. I show in my art marketing boot camp, I have a picture of two escalators, one going up and one going down. At any given time, there's always some people who are leaving the market, and there's always some people who are entering the market. Yeah. So I train artists and say, look, you have, in a typical year, you have 10% attrition. So let's say you have a mailing list, 10% of those people, this is probably more applicable to a gallery too, and that is that 10% of the people that were your customers will leave you this year. And they're gonna leave you because they lost their money, they had a death, they are downsizing and they don't have room for art, you know, and any of 100 other reasons, they've gotten sick. And so every year in a typical year, knowing you're gonna lose 10%, you have to bring 10% more in, new customers in, which means you need a phishing campaign. You need something that's gonna draw people into you. And that's why people do advertising, why they, you know, they offer free ebooks on their websites and things, because you want to bring in that extra 10%. In the recession of 2008, the number wasn't 10%, it was 60%. So suddenly you had to bring in a whole lot more people. You had to double down and try to bring more and more people in. So you've got people who are coming into the market at all times, and you want to be the one they go to. You want to be the one that gets your brand captured. I think that if I were an artist, and I am, but I don't make my living as an artist, if I wanted to get to the level of being known as somebody at the level of a David LaFell or a Richard Schmid or, you know, somebody at that level, I would like double down right now on my visibility campaigns, because you eliminate all that noise. And when you eliminate the noise, people see you more, people pay attention more, people will look more. and that'll give you an advantage. It won't happen overnight, but it will help you leapfrog others. It'll help you leapfrog the galleries, or it'll help you leapfrog the artists who have decided they're not going to advertise during times like this. And it's times like this where careers are made or broken. And I remember Jay Abraham, who's a friend of mine, who's a consultant, gave me a concept one time. He said that there is always a moment in time in any career where there's a spark. He said that spark will ignite your career. He said sometimes that spark is accidental, sometimes it's intentional, but he said you always want to be ready to jump on an opportunity because that might be the spark. So for instance, an artist or a gallery that wants to get noticed, sometimes that spark is just jump out there and do things and get noticed right now so that you can raise to a higher level now, rather than, you know, holding tight and trying to keep your cookies dry, which I totally understand, and you've got to do that too. But what we've done, and this has been hard because we had to lay people off, we had to lay folks off, but we also know that if we don't continue to be visible, that it would hurt our business long term and we might not survive it. So, you know, we're still advertising our plein air convention, our figurative art convention, our artist retreats and things like that. Now, we know that a lot of people aren't going to buy that ticket today, but as we repeat it and repeat it, we're creating hopefully some desire. And then when things do get better and they remember that desire and we keep reminding them, then maybe that, you know, that will spark them to purchase. And so the key here is stay in contact with people, remain visible. I would be doubling down on my newsletters to clients right now. You know, if you did one a month, why not do one a week? This is a time they would probably accept it. And, you know, it's okay to say, hey, by the way, I could use a little help. I haven't sold a painting in a month. And if you see anything, I'd love to work with you on it. And some people who are loyal will do that.
Yeah. Well, to add to what you're saying, one of the worst things that can happen is people say, well, whatever happened to what's her name? Whatever happened to what's his name? They're just they're not there anymore. You don't see them anymore. That's
really true. I was having a dialogue with an artist who was at one time very famous. And he said to me, he said, Eric, I don't understand it. He said, my painting hasn't changed. I'm just as good a painter as I ever was, but I only sell a couple of paintings now. I used to sell dozens and dozens of paintings. He said, what changed? And I said, you changed. And he said, what do you mean? I said, you're not following the things that made you successful. I haven't seen you out there. I haven't seen you doing shows. I haven't seen you doing books. I haven't seen you advertising. He said, well, I don't need those things now because I have a big name. And I said, well, are you selling enough art? He said, no. And then the light went off. But I said, there's a whole generation. I said, when was the last time you ran an ad? He said, 10 years ago. I said, there's a whole generation. If you imagine that you lose 10% a year, that's essentially 100% of the people who knew you are not even in the market anymore. Yeah. And the light went off and he realized, yeah, I've got to get back in the game. Because the minute you drop out of the game, it's out of sight, out of mind. People forget you very quickly.
No, you're absolutely right. The other thing is I was wondering, I've had a couple of artists talk to me and they've asked, well, should I discount my work at this time?
I think there's two answers to that, and neither one are the right one. I'm not sure. Well, first off, what do you think? What did you tell them?
My feeling is that it might not hurt as a temporary, save all measure to maybe lower your price a little bit, or to do something. I know we a good friend of ours, Colin Page in Maine. He's selling jigsaw puzzles of his paintings, and they're beautiful puzzles. Yeah. They're wood and they're carved into these wonderful shapes like lobsters and fish, because he's so much up there. And Linda and I bought one, and I don't think he's paying for his kids and and his home and everything by selling jigsaw puzzles, but it keeps him out there.
Yeah, I think you have to do anything and everything you can. My answer to your question would be this, is that discounting is always tricky. The first thing is, don't assume that somebody wants a discount. Don't just automatically offer it, because if you do, you're in a way, you're cutting your own throat. Now, like, the Ferrari dealer may be offering that. My dad has a car that he's had for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. And the dealer called him and they said, Mr. Rhoads, you haven't bought a new car for 10 or 15 years. And we have a new model of this car, which does all this. And they went through it and they said, we would like to bring you the car and let you drive it for a week. And he said, oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, they're trying to sell him a new car and he knows that. And he might end up buying a new car after he realizes how much better he likes it. They're not necessarily offering a discount, but they're being aggressive, so why not say, hey, I've got a couple paintings sitting around the studio that I think you might like. What I'd like to do is to give it to you on loan for 30 days so you can look at it during the coronavirus crisis. I'll drop it off at your house. I don't even have to shake your hand. You can hang it up and look at it. And I know you're good for it. You'll return it in the future. Now, some people would shudder at that thought, but if something starts to grow on you and next thing you know, you're like, yeah, I need to own that. So that's one thing you can do. Secondly, there's a principle in marketing that you never do discounting unless you get something else in return, because if you're lowering your price, what else do you need? So oftentimes it's, I'll give you this price, but if you'd buy 2 of them,
Yeah.
you'll see that in retail stores all the time. And sometimes it's just a matter of, if you want to always be honest with people and you want to have a dialogue with people, which is like, if you know them really well, you might be willing to say, listen, I could use a little help. I haven't sold a painting in months or in a month or something. And so I could use a little help. And would you be willing to buy a painting? Some people say, yeah, I like this one on your website. I'd do that. Some people will ask for a discount. Some people won't. But I don't think you need to. I think the idea of just automatically saying everything 50% off, it just reeks of insecurity.
Yeah, it's like a car dealer having a red tax sale or something. But there are also several types of art dealers. There's a type of art dealer, they'll sell you something pretty because it matches your sofa. And there's others that cater to people that want a certain artist or a certain period of art. Now, as an artist, especially a successful artist, an artist that's been selling, they've got a support system. They've got a lot of collectors, and it is something that you can, like you said, call them up and chat with them and see how they're doing. Ask them about their experiences, and invariably it'll come up that paintings are for sale and they could buy something nice.
Absolutely. I think that's a really important principle. And by the way, that's something we should be doing all the time, even in good times, because buyers who already know and like you are more likely to buy a second, third, fourth, fifth painting than trying to spend the money to develop new buyers. Now, really, you have to do both. But, I created a product a couple of years ago called Art Marketing in a Box, and it was designed to help artists become kind of local celebrity artists and to sell locally. And the principles of that were, stay in front of people all the time, send them emails, send them newsletters, send them postcards, and we kind of pre-wrote them so that they didn't have to make that stuff up. But the idea, and people would be resistant. And then next thing you know, they'd say, hey, I got a call from Charlie, and Charlie saw my postcards 3 months in a row, and he picked up the phone and said, hey, I was looking at your website. I want to buy that painting. And what made you prompt that? Well, it's because I hadn't really been thinking about you, but I like your work. I own one of your works already, and I found something else I like I have to own. So staying in front of people, what you want to do right now is amplify the amount of time. We are all a little overly sensitive to how much email should I send? How much is too much? And you're going to have to figure that out on your own. But most people always err on the side of caution. And right now, you probably have more opportunity. And, you know, for instance, I'm sending out a daily email now about a video that we're doing every day at 3 o'clock Eastern on Facebook.
Yes, I've been getting them.
And so far, I haven't had any complaints about it. Maybe you're going to complain right now.
No,
But the idea is, I can be there more visible because I'm giving them something during this period of time. They're watching it. They're helping us. We're helping them, and so it's a win-win. But if I did that under normal times, and I do send out a lot of emails, but if I did that under normal times, they'd probably lynch me. So I think you have to find what works for you, but certainly once a week is certainly not, if you're sending out once a month, you certainly could send once a week and say, you know, here's a picture to help you have a little peace this week, and, you know, send a beautiful landscape or one of those paintings behind John there where it's, you know, beautiful beach scene or something. And, or you could get creative. You could say, here's an image to use for your screensaver to keep you surrounded by beauty during this difficult time. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. It's the goal is being creative, but I think I've heard so many people say, I'm just going to paint. I'm using this time to paint. And I've talked to one dealer who said, you know, the doors aren't open. We're not answering the phone. We're not doing email. We're just going to take the time off. Nobody's going to buy anything anyway. And to me, it's opportunity lost. There's chance to build brand, build deeper relationships, stay visible, and staying visible is the name of the game in the marketing world.
Well, I think you have the right idea with your emails, because in this time when you're stuck at home, you look, either you watch television or you get onto the internet, and you want something new every day. You want something to keep you interested.
Yeah.
And, you know, people don't send each other's email every day. So I get on the web, and I see that, you know, I get 2 or 3 things, but if there's something from one of my friends, an artist or something, I'm going to be very happy to read it. And you're doing the right thing. And you have an audience, it's almost a captive audience. And they're home and they're going to turn to the internet. And I think it's, like you say, this is a good time to do it.
By the 3rd day of offering these free daily videos, which are about an hour of art instruction from some of the videos we've produced and also interviews with the artists, by the 3rd day, we had 250,000 views.
Wow.
It just is mind-boggling to me, because, you know, people are discovering it through other means, and people who have commented and so on, they show up in other people's social media feeds. And what's remarkable to me is that I'm meeting a lot of new people who didn't know we existed. Yeah. And so that's why you want to be proactive right now. I was going to say aggressive. That's not really the right word, but you want to be proactive. You want to stay out there. And you also mentioned, you know, when you have emails from people, what I've been trying to do, and I'm still working 8-hour, 10-hour days like I always do, and I work from home, so it's no different for me anyway. The only difference is I'm not going out to the pizza parlor at night, but or going out for a beer. But the weekends I have more time, and I think the idea is that I want to connect with people at a deeper level, not to necessarily sell them anything. It's just I want the opportunity. So I got a Facebook message from Jeff Baumgartner, a painter friend of mine, the other day, and I started to write him an answer, and I thought, no, I'll just pick up and call him. So I called him, and we chatted for an hour, and we burned an hour talking about old times. And to me, that was like, in a normal business environment, I'd be too frantic, there's too much going on. I'd be like, Jeff, I got to get off the phone, you know, and it was so nice to be able to just have a chat. So this is the time when you can really reinforce and develop your friendships and your relationships too. Yeah,
it works both ways. You get to reach out to people, and people feel you're concerned about them. You want to talk to them, and it's a good way to use your time. So even with me as an art historian, My wife Linda has convinced me to start doing these little discussions about certain paintings in our collections, like the ones behind me.
I've seen them. They're fabulous.
Well, there's nothing for sale, but I don't want to be forgotten. I don't want to fall off the radar either.
Well, I was telling Linda, your wife, that you better make sure your insurance is paid up, because just don't publish your address.
Yeah, no, don't give them the address. We have a very good alarm system, by the way.
Yeah. And you live in New York City, isn't that right?
No, in Austin.
No. So Jean, your family, you come from a family of art dealers. Your father was an art dealer. Your brother, you have one brother that's a dealer too?
I have Louis and George, two brothers.
And then you have a nephew that's a dealer.
Yeah, even.
And then your daughter is very active in the arts community here in Austin. So you guys have been through this, your brothers, and you were at one time an art dealer as well. So you have survived multiple recessions as family members in the art business. What have your businesses done that helped you survive?
Well, most of our businesses have been with rare art, rare paintings. And that's a bit of a different customer than, say, somebody like Brian Mark Taylor or any of our living artists. But the thing with the collector's side of it is, if you've got something that's absolutely the very best, it'll sell real fast. If you have something that's really good, it probably won't sell, not right now. A lot of people, when the stock market went down, I have a feeling a lot of people were looking for hard assets to buy and to try to get out of it. So again, as I said, there was an auction last week that a lot of the really good paintings brought a lot of money. But we talk to our collectors. That's what we do, and we also, it's a good chance to buy.
Yeah,
it's a good chance to buy, because people are, for one reason or other, are wanting to raise money. So, but the last thing I want, as a dealer or as an art historian, as a dealer especially, and it applies to artists, is to be forgotten, to fall off the radar, and people don't know what's going on. They think for some reason you've gone back to, to working in an auto plant or something. But it's a good time to keep people informed, and on the other hand, they'll appreciate it, because if you collect somebody's art, you like that person, and you like it.
I think that you can't reinforce that concept enough. It is so important not to fall off the radar, because people do quickly forget. I've seen it so many times. The other thing that I think is really important is that don't assume that just because you're on social media that you're going to be seen. And what I mean by that is that statistically, depending on your account, but statistically, the average account, let's say you have 5,000 friends on Facebook, which is the limit you can have. Statistically, when you do a post, they only show that to 2% of your friends. Now, if you can increase your engagement levels, if you respond to every comment and people respond to you, you might get up to 4% or 5%, but it's very rare that you're getting pushed out to everybody who sees it. So there's this false sense of security that I'm reaching people on Facebook or even Instagram. The other thing is even if you are reaching them, it doesn't mean they're going to see the post or they're going to read the post. I don't know about you, but sometimes I flip through real quickly and I miss things. And so, and then the last piece of that is, if you're selling art, you have to sell art to people who buy art. Mm-hmm. Now, interestingly enough, we did a survey at the Plein Air Convention, and when we were in Tucson, you were there. I asked how many people in the room have bought, not traded, but bought a painting in the last year, and 80% of the hands went up and stayed up for 5 or more paintings in a lot of cases. So a lot of artists are actually buying art or have bought art. And what's interesting now, and I think you've seen this, I was talking to the people at Plein Air Easton, and they said people who had attended the show as collectors and viewers are now becoming artists because they've been living vicariously through the artists and now they're learning it. They're not necessarily good enough to be in the show, but they're there as as artists who are buying art, but also who appreciate it in a different level because they're now learning it.
Say for Laguna plein air painters, exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
La Papa show, they say, I want to be an artist too. And most of them are artists, but they haven't really expanded.
Yeah. Well, I think that, it's important to find places that have known lists of collectors, known list of art buyers, and stay visible in front of those places. And because I think that's really important. I want to ask you a question. What do you think, we have seen, we started Plein Air Magazine, roughly about 15, 16 years ago, I think. And when we started the magazine, there weren't a lot of workshops. There were hardly any plein air events. Laguna was one of the plein air events. There may have been a couple of others, but we've now seen this grow into 200-300 plein air events.
Or at least.
At least. And, every city, every place has got one or two. What do you think the impact will be of all of this on those plein air events?
Well, I think it's making it more and more popular. There are a lot of, frankly, if it wasn't for you, there wouldn't be all this plein air activity because your magazine, it's just a wonderful way to get involved. And there's a lot of little ones that never advertise, that nobody knows outside of town that they're having a plein air event. But I am grateful for all you've done because it's really made a big difference how much of an impact you've had on the plein air scene and made it into a national phenomenon, which is really wonderful. And the fact was, I was talking about that it's subjective painting. It's not subjective. You don't need to know what the artist had in mind. You look at the painting and it immediately reaches your soul. And that's one of the things. You don't need somebody to look over your shoulder and tell you what you're looking at, or why don't you understand this, or clearly you're not into art. So it's viewer friendly. That's what it is.
You brought up a subject that I think is worth talking about. It's not necessarily related to this particular moment in time, but could be. And that is that there are a lot of people who the kids get a hold of the art. The kids don't appreciate it, don't understand it, don't want it. And then the kids are trying to get rid of it. How big is that? And is that becoming a bigger and bigger problem? Is it lesser of a problem?
Well, in dealing with historic arts and collectible art like my family does, the artist is driven to collect. They spend their whole life and a lot of their funds to buy paintings. And they're usually, to buy the paintings that my family deals in, you have to be pretty well off. You have to have a lot of disposable income. And the important thing to them is not that they're going to turn around and sell it and make money. If you're going to do that, you might as well open a gallery and do the thing for 24 hours a day like we do. But they're going to keep the paintings. And when they die, they generally leave the money to the kids, not the paintings, because the kids are going to sell the paintings. And then they try to find a repository, a museum, an institution where they can donate their paintings and have their legacy forever marked as being a brilliant collector, somebody that had good taste, somebody that knew what they were doing. We were talking to some people that own a very, very important Guy Rose. Guy Rose is the most important of the California Impressionists. And she said very clearly when we were talking about one of her paintings, the Guy Rose, the Green Parasol, perhaps the most important Guy Rose ever painted. And she said, well, we don't really own the painting. We're just the custodians. We're just the stewards, because somebody else will have it. You don't own it. You don't put it in your tomb and keep it forever. Somebody else ends up with it. But a lot of collectors want their to be remembered as having been very brilliant collectors. And Some collectors buy really, really wonderful paintings. Others, they don't quite know what they're doing, but they like what they buy and they have it on their walls. So I think that's a difference. Now with living artists, and we have a lot of friends that are living artists, and we have their paintings all over our walls. We have over 100 paintings on the walls and probably as many in the closet and under the bed.
I want to know who's under the bed.
There's a couple of artists that haven't really been nice to us. You know, the experience of buying a painting is what really works. In a gallery setting, if you are heckled, if you have a bad experience buying a painting, you're never going to come back.
That's right.
So, and the same with artists. Artists are people, and well, most artists are. But anyway, and the way they react to the buyer and the way they become friends is very important.
Well, Jean, do you have any final thoughts on this whole coronavirus thing, as it relates to art?
Well, I think we both agree that you got to stay visible. You can't disappear. Doing it through the internet is a good way to do it. My wife Linda keeps saying, "Show your best work. Show your best work." That's a good idea, but a lot of artists don't know what their best work is. It's usually the spouse that knows what the best work is. So most artists that create everything is perfect, and the spouse says, "No, that'll never sell."
Yeah, my wife is very much that way. She'll walk in and she'll go, "Oh, that's completely wrong." So you brought something up. I'll just touch on it right now because it concerns me, maybe not a lot, but a little. And that is that there's this kind of, because of social media, we have this, "Hey, look at me" kind of mentality. And I know what happens because I almost did it last night. I'm trying to get everybody to paint self-portraits for a whole lot of reasons. And so I decided I better do one myself. So I got this great big canvas and started a self-portrait last night. And I took a picture of it and I was gonna post it and say "in progress." And I caught myself and I said, no, because somebody will think it's finished. They won't read the "in progress," and then I'll destroy my reputation, what little I have. And then I came in this morning and looked at it and I thought, thank goodness I didn't post it. Don't you think that part of the issue is that we're posting everything? I was always taught when I was into photography, it's all about editing. And you don't show every painting that you've ever done. You don't show every photograph you've ever done. You show the best, and the rest of them kind of hide out somewhere.
No, you said that at every plein air convention. It's the best advice you can give people. And again, I hate to say this, but the artist is not the best judge of their own work. So get somebody else, somebody you trust, a good friend, a spouse, somebody. I had an experience once where I was called by the wife of an artist, and she said, "My husband wants to send 2 paintings to the National Arts Club in New York, and we disagree as to which one it is. Can you come over?" So I go over there. It was Tim Clark, the great watercolor painter. And I go over there and I come into the room and I look, I said, "That one." And she says, "See?" And guess what? It did win an award at the National Arts Club. So I am a firm believer that you are not the judge of your own work, that somebody else has to judge it.
Do you offer any, I know you have a full-time job as a museum director, but do you offer any services like that? Or do you know people that do, where they can hire you to consult them on their careers or to tell them what's good and not good?
Well, I have a lot of artists that come up to me and say, "Would you critique my work?" And I say, well, that's like putting your head into the lion's mouth.
Yeah.
And unless I know you very well and you know me very well, I don't do that. And if we really know each other and they understand that what I come from is a positive point of view, then I will do it to some extent. Now, I'm not a painter, but I know the elements of paintings. I've seen thousands and thousands of paintings. I've judged dozens of shows. And I can't tell you how to paint it, but I can tell you whether or not it's a successful painting.
Oh, I think that
It's
makes sense.
risky.
I'm sorry?
It's risky.
It's risky. Well, but you need that. Everybody needs that. I have a couple of buddies that I'll call and I'll send them a picture of a painting I'm working on. I'll say something's not right, but I don't know what it is. And they
Yeah.
can see it every time when I can't see it.
Well, that's exactly what you should be doing. You're doing the right thing.
Yeah. Well, this has been really fun doing this. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you. It is fun. And sorry about the blackout in the middle of the program.
Well, we'll just edit that out.